Welcome back to Brashenomics on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. A great show so far. More to come. David Murphy joined us, Aubrey Cohen, and now the one and only Michael Busacca from Skyline Properties. Michael, how are you, man?
I'm well. How about you, Ben?
I'm doing pretty good. And you're also a baseball fan.
To a degree. I gotta confess, football and motorsports are my favorite things. But I do hope the Mariners one day put it all together. I had high hopes in that 116-win season, but then, of course, they were dashed.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. Football's coming up, though, man. Football is coming up. Again, when you start thinking about football, I guess, same thing. You score as many points as you can, you win the game. But a lot of times in this current real estate market, you can't just keep bidding up a price to win. Eventually, it becomes, I guess, a tainted win if you put too much money up on a house. And you guys have been working with a lot of buyers, helping people kind of go through this, not the sale part of a short sale, but actually purchasing a home when you may have 10 other offers, 20 other offers that you're competing with.
Yeah, it's pretty hard on the buyers right now because they've had to shift their whole mentality from, hey, I can beat up a seller to, I feel like I'm getting beaten up. So they need to really carry a couple of points going forward. One is, no matter how much you love a house, there will be another one. I think prices are coming back strongly, but they're not going to get away from us ever again. Underwriting standards will never be that lax again. If you have a decent job, your worst case scenario with pricing is that you might have to commute a little farther, but you'll definitely be able to buy a home, within a reasonable commute.
Yeah, that's a big point that I've been bringing up too. Is that the reason house prices are going up is not just because people are borrowing more money, necessarily because they're just being allowed to. There's much better fundamentals.
Much better fundamentals. And, one point I wanted to make regarding the lack of inventory, I talked to a couple of big-time developers, and they said, since people couldn't get construction loans for the last few years, there's such a lack of new construction versus the market norm that right now that's one of the big reasons that buyers are having to just bid things up because they don't have the choices like they did even 3 or 4 years ago.
And that really puts people in a position where if you want to buy a house, you got to find somebody who's selling it.
Absolutely. And, I can tell people, look, it's okay to, if you feel like things are too aggressive, to take a moment. Usually in the fall, the competing buyer demand backs off, especially November, December. If you can handle the stress of the holidays and buying a home, quite often you put yourself in an advantageous position.
So what are some big things that come into these multiple offer situations? I mean, how does somebody determine, the max offer they should put down?
You really have to check your context. You have to see what things are selling for. And then at the end of the day, you have to think one thing above all else. At what price is this property no longer attractive? Because there's going to be a price where you think, I didn't want it. Whatever you're bidding on. If you're bidding on a card in auction, art, if you're that wealthy, you can buy art. There's a point where you say, hey, I can go get something else. You
can buy some cheap art, Mike. I've seen it.
Maybe
I
not
own
it.
it.
I think there's a price that you get for anything that you won't pay, though.
That's true. So then you start thinking about these price points, and I guess you kind of have to strategize on how you're going to maybe hit that top price point. Is that right?
Exactly. Here's precisely how you have to make sure your broker knows how to word these acceleration clauses correctly. There's been some sloppiness over the years, and this is exactly the way to do it. You say, look, buyer's offer shall beat all other net offers. That is, if someone has a competing offer at $570, but they're asking for $5,000 in closing costs, their net offer is $565. And you're going to beat by an increment. The increment's usually a minimum of $1,000, but as you go up the price scale, I've seen winning by $2,000 all the way up to winning by $10,000 in the multi-million-dollar property range. Not that there's a ton of multiple offers up there, but anyone can underprice and rev up demand and get more than one offer. So then you say, okay, you're going to beat all their offers by a certain increment up to a maximum purchase price of X. So typically, if a property's on at $580, it's really aggressive. You think it's going to bid to $600. You might want to say, I want to beat all the other offers up to $602,000 to just clear that obvious bidding increment. And then here's another caveat. You need to say, in the event of no other offers, a buyer's offer shall be X. So you have a basement, a ceiling, and an increment in between.
What are some of the biggest mistakes people make when going through this type of process?
They literally lose their mind. I mean, I'm sure auctioneers can tell you about auction fever when people think this is like literally the last life preserver on the Titanic. It's not.
Yeah, and then they sell two of them. Two of you guys
Precisely.
can buy this, yeah. So then, when it seems to come down to money a lot. I mean, a lot of people think that's the only way to really negotiate. But when you start looking at a real estate contract, there are other ways, aren't there?
There's a ton of other ways. I've helped people win multiple offers on a variety of different angles. Sometimes it's emotional. I've seen where there were 3 identical offers, and there was an elderly seller, and he or she had attachment to their home. They lived there 40 years, and they really cared about the people, coming to buy their home. They didn't want a developer buying it or someone who didn't have the passion they had. So we call it a warm fuzzy letter. Write a letter. Tell them who you are, and what you really intend to do with the property. Then also, you can remove contingencies. So that's where the terms pre-inspecting, waiving your inspection, not something I advise unless you're a builder, things of that nature.
So really you end up being able to potentially purchase that property without spending more money, just kind of knowing a little bit more about the purchasing process and mitigating some of those contingencies before you make your offer.
Exactly. And, if there's a savvy listing broker, they'll tell their seller, look, this one offer, the highest offer, is $3,000 more than the other offers, but it's pie in the sky. This person's financing is really flimsy. I don't trust it. So therefore,
it's with a small bank in Omaha, Nebraska that nobody's heard of.
A bank somewhere in the Antarctic.
Yeah.
At any rate.
Mattress money.
The bottom line is a cash offer consistently can win for less because then you have no appraisal, you have no underwriting standards, things like that. Or even a 20% down offer will traditionally beat an FHA or a VA low down payment offer. So
it's interesting that, the financing piece of this and, coming from the mortgage side of things, the financing piece of an offer is becoming more and more prevalent, especially as the mortgage industry gets so bombarded with refinances since rates are so low that it becomes, can a lender close the deal? Because once the deal's kind of in process, it falls a lot on the lender that a buyer chooses to get it done in time. I mean, that's typically what people are waiting on. It's not your title insurance or your appraisal.
Exactly. As a listing broker, if I'm helping a seller choose which offer is the best, I mean, I have an absolute responsibility to that person to thoroughly vet the financing as much as possible. Now, you get to a point where lenders say, I can't disclose any more about this person, but I can ask, hey, how squeezed are their ratios? What's their job history? Things like that. So we think, okay, this offer you're signing has the highest percentage chance of closing.
Yeah, and I think that becomes one of the big pieces, because if you're selling your house, no matter how high the contract is, if they can't close on it, it doesn't really make much difference.
Exactly. And if they have a proper financing contingency, if they didn't waive that in the bidding, they'll get their earnest money back, and you'll be out the 30 to 40 days they tied you up.
And that doesn't bode well for anybody. Michael, we just have a couple minutes left before we go to break. Again, Michael Busacca of Skyline Properties. When you start thinking about understanding what you're buying. Now, with Aubrey, we just talked about the neighborhood discovery about the house. It seems like most people are going to go look at the house, obviously. They're going to see what they can see. A lot of them hire an inspector. What advice do you give people, though, about understanding what's going on in the neighborhood?
Oh, that's a complex one. I got to say, buyers these days tend to be so much less naive than they were when the market was busy. They actually tend to overemphasize every negative they can possibly find. It helps as a buyer to be pragmatic and go, okay, the house will have a certain number of fixes. I don't care what you're buying, it will. And the neighborhood will have a certain number of unattractive lots on it. Focus more on, as Aubrey mentioned, school district. Focus more on your commute. And, you can check crime stats, things like that, too. But try to be pragmatic. The perfect formula is just a pie in the sky.
Yeah, and certainly, peering, walking, I imagine, or the perimeter of the neighborhood, or the house. And, you could go talk to neighbors, couldn't you?
Oh, I highly recommend it. Go talk to your neighbors. I helped some clients of mine are selling there. Here it is, the Ballard Craftsman for $599.
You and Aubrey.
When they bought it, interestingly enough, they bought this home from a woman who was the least popular in the neighborhood. And when they came in, they were welcomed by all neighbors. And they said, hey, we have a perfect neighborhood now. Yeah. So, funny dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess neighborhoods do become, subject to the people that live there. Oh, yeah. You talked also, we do have to go to break, but, I really think it's interesting. You come through and on both sides, whether you're helping somebody buy or sell, there's so much that's involved in helping them reach their goal. And, kind of what we brought up at the very beginning of this was this Ichiro deal, where all of a sudden, sometimes a relationship can break down. It would seem that your goal would be to make sure the relationship doesn't break down with a house for a long period of time.
Definitely. And, as a broker, I try to bring as much foresight as possible. I don't want people to have regrets down the road. So you inspect until you can't stand it anymore. You have sewer scopes. You check on oil tank decommissioning. You can have a hazardous material specialist go through a house. You can do anything. But, back to Ichiro, the Mariners kind of decided they didn't want to bid any higher, just like someone in a multiple offer may say, hey, I'll pass. This is too expensive.
Well, I think anything would have been too expensive for him at this point in time. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. We have to go to break. When we come back, David Murphy, Aubrey Cohen, myself, and Michael Busacca will continue the conversation. We'll be right back after this break.